Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to Rattlecast number 247. Thanks so much for joining me. Today's guest is Nancy Miller Gomez, returning for her second appearance on the Rattlecast with her first full-length book, Inconsolable Objects. She'll be here in about 10 minutes. But before we begin, I should say that and my mom wanted me to say this differently because she was tired of the way that I say it the same all the time. But it's a legal disclaimer, so I have to say it the same way every time. Sorry, Mom. And I could say it at the end of the show, but I forget when I say it at the end of the show, and I can't do that, so I still have to say it. So Rattle's a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do all this because we love poetry. I can say this different, so I'll say this is the best long-form live stream poetry podcast on the planet. So if you enjoy it as much as I enjoy spreading poetry around, please do click the like button. Make sure you subscribe, leave reviews, anything you can do to help spread poetry, because it may be the best, maybe the only live streaming long-form poetry podcast on the planet. But if you love it, please do help by sharing it wherever you can. Now we're going to go to today's Poet Respond poet, like we always like to start with. And Ryan McCarty is here for the second time in 6 weeks. It's great to see you again, Ryan. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Tim. It's great to be back so soon.
Yeah, definitely. I think that some people get on these runs where they love Poet Respond and they keep sending great poems. And I think you're on one of those runs right now. A more difficult one than the last one, which is sort of an encouraging, positive type poem. This is something that happened on campus at the university you work at. So let us know the background of this poem, how it came to be.
Yeah. I'm a lecturer at the University of Michigan, and I work with a lot of students, graduate organizers, undergrad organizers, and they had established an encampment, like on so many universities across the country, protesting investment in the war in Gaza. And just this past week, just one morning, just before 6 a.m., cops showed up and they said, You've got to go. You have 10 minutes. And at 6 minutes, they started swinging and pepper spraying. I think the video that I shared with you has the timestamp on that. Lots of people were hurt. Lots of people were spread all over the place. And people went to the hospital and a few were arrested. And so that's the sort of background on this. There were my students, my colleagues, my friends, community members, things like that. They were in the middle of a prayer service, actually, a non-denominational, multi-religious prayer service when the cops showed up. So
yeah, and from that video, you notice one cop in particular was sort of the entry point into this poem. So describe that too for people who can only listen.
Yeah, I was watching the video of sort of after they dispersed everybody, and then it kept coming after the crowds and pepper spraying. And there was one particularly egregious cop who was spraying a lot, and then I just kept looking at this cop next to them who was just like seemed like they were trying to look away. It's kind of a blurry, far off video. Look away, but was still a cop holding a baton and holding the line and all of that. And I kept rewinding and looking at this person over and over again. And from where they were positioned, like I say in the poem, I can see that they're looking eastward, like where like the sunrise was probably just coming up over the buildings on campus. It probably was beautiful where they were looking, so long as they didn't look at what they were like physically a part of at that moment.
Yeah. Really interesting thing to note is so many, poems come about from noticing something. Why don't you read the poem and we'll talk a little bit more about it.
Yeah. This is Ode to the Cop, next to the one with the pepper spray. Your cheek turns Christ-like from your buddy with the Buddha belly blowing chemicals on crowds of my students. One falls face down while her own mucus and sweat bottlenecks in the rush to exit every hole she has. You might or might not know the blind terror of drowning, the lung-torn scream that almost always does the trick eventually, boosted by the guts heaving underneath till air breaks through. 10 seconds. Not like Floyd, but enough to feel your mother pounding inside your skull, calling for you this time to forget the grass hasn't always mixed the gravel on your knees and palms in a prayer of almost dying. Officer, you know the straight-backed virtue of duty. Eyes cast to the horizon, white vapors spreading to the morning. You avoid the sight of a baseball cap skirting the fog, kneeling, eyes on your chin, helping the retching shoulders rise. I'll buy you a beer. Let's rewind and rewatch on half speed. Wait for one foot to stir, one hand to drop the pose. Never, you never break. While we play you again and again, you can explain for all of us non-heroes how to hold the line, to pity the spastic, terrified flapping of robins escaping their trees in the choke your boy backhands into the crowd, how to see the birds disperse when sense commands, how to look away from a body and really believe.
Yeah, it's a great poem. Once again, that is Ode to the Cop, Next to the One with the Pepper Spray by Ryan McCarty. And interesting, too, one of the things I loved about this poem, not only are the details great, the images great, and the lines interesting, but the whole poem can almost be like an extended metaphor for the political situation itself, for the governments of the world that stand by and sort of stare into the distance while other things are going on. And I love that you didn't mention that, in the poem. You sort of let that metaphor sit there with that. Were you tempted to, or what did you think about when you were writing this poem?
Yeah, it was such an interesting thing because I was really trying to hold back and think just about this person and their role in it, and like how they stood in terms of police violence and just violence overall in the world. I had just written, I write political journalism pieces, and I had just written one about the relationship between this and police violence writ large, and so I had that in my mind, but that's not how poetry works, right? To look at one particular detail, to think about one particular person, I tried to hold to as much as I could, and I think maybe the one part where I skirted off was the sort of likening it to the George Floyd case, which I didn't even realize at the time. I must have known somewhere, but I probably didn't. That Sunday was the anniversary. Yesterday, Saturday, was the anniversary of his murder. So that sort of came to me, as happens in poetry.
Yeah, for sure. Interesting coincidence too. Well, thanks, Ryan, for being here, sharing that great poem, and do keep them coming.
All right. Thanks so much, Tim. Have a good one.
Yep, thanks. Yeah, that was Ryan McCarty, today's Poets Respond poet. Now we're going to take a quick break and go to our main guest, Nancy Miller Gomez, so sit tight, and we will be right back with more poetry. And we're back. Like I said, today's guest is Nancy Miller Gomez. Nancy first appeared in Rattlecast 146. If you want to watch more of that, you can turn back that almost exactly 100 episodes, almost 2 years ago to the day. Her chapbook Punishment was published as part of the Rattle chapbook series. She's worked as a waitress, a stable hand, an attorney, and a television producer. She co-founded an organization that provides writing workshops to incarcerated women and men and has taught poetry in many prisons and jails. Her first full-length poetry manuscript, Inconsolable Objects, right here, is now available, just out from YesYes Books. She grew up in Kansas but currently lives in Santa Cruz, California. You can find all of her stuff at nancymillergomez.com. And here she is, Nancy Miller Gomez. Hey, Nancy, it's great to see you again.
Hi, Tim. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, it's definitely my pleasure. We don't have repeat guests very often. I sort of have little rules, like some speed limits I limit it to. And but you are one of those poets who I always said was the best poet writing that doesn't have a book out yet, a full length book. And now you do. So we had to have you on. And also we talked so much about the prison system and that dealing with punishment last time. I thought it'd be fun to talk about other things too. So it's really cool to have you, and congratulations on this book.
Thank you very much. And I am very grateful to you for your ongoing encouragement and support because, you know, back when I was sending it out for submission, you were very vocal about saying that you thought highly of it, and that kept me going. So greatly appreciated.
Well, definitely my pleasure because we need more great poets in the world, great poems in the world. So I'm really happy to have this out, and they did a beautiful job with YesYes Books too. The book looks beautiful.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure to work with them. Yeah.
Well, do you want to start out with the poem?
Yes, I do. So, I think you had mentioned Coach Whip.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's start with that.
Right. Coach Whip. It was the winter the snake went missing. We searched through laundry hampers, peered into toilets, stepped everywhere, carefully. No one slept well. On the eve of the 8th day, my mother turned on the garbage disposal and heard the gargle of blades grinding through bones and flesh. Later, she fished out the mangled creature with an oven mitt and laid it down outside on a bed of snow-capped compost. All that year I dreamt of knives sleeping beneath me. Mornings, I woke to the memory of the beautiful black coils, the diamond-braided skin in ribbons, and because I was a child, plagued by imagination, I waited for them to rise up from the drain, silent as shadows. The kitchen brimming with generations of snakes draped over the chairs and light fixtures, a river of lacerated bodies slithering out of the sink, while the largest serpent slipped off, tasting the air with his tongue, sidewinding down the hall in search of my mother.
Yeah, that was Coach Whip, one of the early poems from Nancy Miller Gomez's new book, Inconsolable Objects. And this is the beautiful cover here. I didn't show a close-up version yet, but I love that cover image too. The girl, similar to that snapshot poem in the front, kind of. You can imagine that could be you. And then that great owl in the corner too. I love that. So really cool cover, and a great book. Let's start out talking about something a little more complicated right off the bat. Poems. I love that poem because there's this connection between dreams and poetry. And so when dreams come up in poems, I just love that fact because there's something that we're processing in dreams that we're processing too in poems. There's a way that they're really related. Do you think they're related to you? Like, do you think that the impulse to write a poem is the same as the impulse to dream?
It's a really difficult question. Yeah, you do lead with the difficult questions, don't you? Um, I've never given that any thought, but I do know that my favorite time to write is first thing when I open my eyes in the morning, because I'm still in that liminal state where you haven't forgotten what you dreamed about. And as you're writing, it feels very much like, you're still kind of crossing into that world where things aren't as logical and as lifelike, and you're able to really make those wild associative leaps. So I do think that dreams influence writing, and I have from time to time written about dreams, but not that often because I jokingly call myself the Amelia Bedelia of poetry because I'm very literal minded. Aside from having a wild imagination, I'm also oxymoronic. How do you like that for a whole bunch of words?
Well, not bad. Yeah, it's interesting you say that in the first thing in the morning because I used to always write right before bed because I liked that sort of all the sort of the detritus of the day slogging around in your brain, and then that half asleep, you're sort of like falling asleep. It feels like the lens over consciousness is a little bit thinner, and you can sort of let stuff slip out. But I'm trying now to transition to a morning writer because I'm getting older and I can't stay up late like I used to.
Well, I actually do both. I write late at night. In fact, I often write until I fall asleep. and then, pick it right back up when I wake up in the morning.
Oh, that's great. Do you ever like find a place to go? I mean, there's all those stories about people who, find some kind of discovery in their sleep. Do you ever like, finish off and then be like, oh, I know which direction I want to take this after you wake up? That's interesting to continue after a night's sleep.
I think it does happen because often what happens is I get so sleepy, that thing where you're trying to work on something, but you're really tired and sleepy. And so then at a certain point, you just sort of give up the ghost and say, well, I'm just going to get some sleep. I'll take a crack at this after in the morning when I've actually, gotten some rest. And I do think sometimes, with fresh eyes, you come back into something and you're able to solve problems or take something in a different direction or see it in a clearer light. And often I do wake up with an idea for something that I was working on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, to get to this book, when I know your poetry really well because we've been friends for a long time, and I wasn't sure how you would organize this book. Punishment had such a clear story to tell, but your other poems are kind of, frankly, all over the place. Like you have, family poems, you have poems about like news and politics, then you have like strange thoughts and, story, those kind of story poems. And I wasn't sure how you were going to organize it. And we talked a little bit about the original title is something like, if you were here, if you were here.
If I lived here, I'd be home now, which you did not like.
I did not, no. But
and I appreciate your candor,
Well, now I think this is great because it's called Inconsolable Objects. And I'm always looking forward to seeing like how a book will be structured. Like that's one of the things, especially, I think maybe because I read so many regular poems as submissions, like it's more interesting to see framework and structure because I don't usually do that. But with this book, it felt to me like looking through a curio cabinet, which is why I love that Inconsolable Objects is the title. Like it feels like these are all little mental oddities that you've like collected, and that allows it to have a wide range of topics while having a bit of cohesiveness too. So is that what you had in mind, and how did you come up with a title that it ended up being?
Well, this book was it very much a labor of evolution. It took on so many different forms. In fact, I think the first time I sent you a manuscript to look at, which you were very kind to look over and be very encouraging about. I think it changed significantly from that first time. A lot of those poems came out. A lot of new poems went in. It got completely restructured, probably half a dozen times. It changed title at least 4, maybe 5 times. And it just kind of evolved. And I got it to a point where, and then it was accepted for publication. And so my editors put their eyes on it. Shout out to KMA at YesYes and Gail, who was also my editor on this. And, between the 3 of us, I think we really shaped it into something where we got it to the place where it was what it was supposed to become. Mm-hmm. And, they did some pushing and I did some pushing and pulling and rejiggering and juggling and, all kinds of moving things around. And I was resistant to making certain changes, but ultimately was convinced to do it. And then I had certain, mentors take a look at it and make suggestions like, you really should take these poems out. And you get so attached to things when you're working on them. You get so attached to your poems, you just can't imagine taking them out of a manuscript. It's like, putting your babies up for adoption or something, and I just had such a hard time doing that. But ultimately, I was able to see the bigger picture, and the manuscript was better and tighter as a result of being able to pull those poems out and just, make it lean and mean. And some of the best advice I got, was from Ellen Bass, who's one of my mentors, who was like, longer isn't better. Mm-hmm. Yeah. As hard as that was for me to recognize. So yeah, I think I didn't answer your question. I'm just rambling here, Tim.
No, it's great. It's great. So, well, it's an interesting topic, though. I think with my book, too, it was the same experience where the first version I liked and it was good, I thought. And then going through and like being forced, because it didn't win. It was like a semifinalist somewhere. And then you're looking at it again. And then, you find a better version and you keep like, which makes me wonder, though, if you waited a longer, would there be an even better version? And then how do you get off of that roller coaster of like, oh, maybe down the line it'll be a little better, so maybe I should just wait. Was it hard to give this up and say this is the final version?
No, I think I was ready to do it, although I was still making changes to it right up to the very end. In fact, KMA, my editor, had to say, enough. You need to stop, or we're not going to make our pub date.
Mhm.
You need, this is it. You can make no more changes. And now I read through the manuscript and I still see places I'm like, oh, I would really like to tweak that. But I would say overall, I'm really delighted with the manuscript. I'm really happy with where it landed. I'm happy with, you had asked about how I decided on the ordering of it. It got moved around a lot. And in fact, right up to the very end, I was still moving poems around. In fact, the very first poem in the manuscript used to be the poem How to Forget, which was published in Rattle recently. And that seemed like a great poem to launch off the manuscript with, because it's a poem about manipulating your memories. And isn't that what poetry and a manuscript really is all about? And I thought, well, that's a great poem to kick off the manuscript with. And then I thought, no, actually, what I really want is to kick it off with Snapshot, which is the poem I shared last time about, my first grade picture, because it speaks more to me as the author and it relates so well to this little girl on the cover.
Mhm.
And I thought, I feel like I want to go with that. It was just sort of an instinctual thing. And I'm really glad I made that choice. But the one thing I didn't do was it's not really organized linearly. I mean, a lot of my poems of my childhood are front loaded in the book, but not all of them. Some of them appear later. They're sort of just mixed in, and it was kind of just a bit of a thematic choices as I worked my way through it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's talk more about that. But first, let's read another poem. I think Resurrection is next. Let's do that.
Oh, okay. This was a poem that I'm very grateful to you for publishing because I love this poem. And not everybody would have been brave enough to publish a poem about giving mouth-to-mouth resuscitation to a dead fish. But this is a poem that is from my childhood, and so it comes relatively early in the book. It's called Resurrection. When I was 5, my brother convinced me to perform mouth-to-mouth on a catfish floating belly up in the scum that gathered in the lake behind our house. He said I had the power to bring it back, though it was my choice. I followed his directions, leaned over the dock, pressed my lips against the stiff ridge of its mouth while keeping its bloated body submerged beneath the oily sheen, and began to breathe in and out as I opened and closed the bony folds of its gills. At first, my brother held my ankles to steady me so I wouldn't fall off the dock. I kept breathing in through my nose, sting of creosote and pond rot, and out through my mouth, a soft exhale of prayer. You already know I did not bring the fish back to life, though it wasn't for lack of trying. I kept breathing into that dark opening long after my brother said to quit, long after he got bored and wandered off, and the setting sun bathed the brackish water in gold. I kept breathing in and out long after the night cooled and the stars rose, and my mother found me asleep on the dock, her voice calling me back from that place where the fish turned its rapturous eyes away from the moon and dove back to its sanctuary of darkness.
Yeah, so that was Resurrection from the new book by Nancy Miller Gomez, Inconsolable Objects. And so, Nancy, so how did you come up with that title? I think that was one part of that compound question before that we didn't get to. It went from the old title to this, and the idea of it being a sort of a series of objects was really interesting to me as a structure. But where did that come from?
So one of the poems in the collection is called An Incomplete Catalog of Inconsolable Objects. And I'm a bit of a collector, as I think you know. I love going to junk stores and flea markets and, just finding trinkets and things that have stories attached to them. I love old clocks. I love old cameras. I have a bunch of old typewriters, things that have probably no value whatsoever to anybody but me. And So Inconsolable Objects is really a list poem about things that hold stories. Or the incomplete catalog of Inconsolable Objects is actually the title of that poem. And so it's a list poem of things that hold stories. And I have given them all human attributes, different human attributes. You know, an apothecary jar that has a mouth, and there's shoes that have soles, and there's fetal mice in a snow globe that have feet, and so they all have like different human body parts, and so Inconsolable Objects, the title really came from that poem. And at one point I thought about calling it the whole long title, An Incomplete Catalog of Inconsolable Objects, but that just felt very long and unwieldy, although I am kind of a fan of big titles, long titles, like Ross Gay's Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude, which actually sounded a little bit too similar. So that was another reason why I decided not to go there. Not that I'm above trying to mimic Ross Gay. I should only be so lucky to get even close to him. But yeah, so after many, many title changes, Inconsolable Objects just kind of felt like it embodied the whole collection, which, because it's like a junk drawer. It's like rummaging in a junk drawer. Here's a memory of me giving mouth-to-mouth resuscitation to a dead catfish. Here's a memory of the snake that got loose in our house. Here's a memory of a tornado. Here's a memory of something else that happened. And they're all just sort of like in my manuscript. So yeah. And everything in there isn't inconsolable, but it is a manuscript that speaks to how we move through our lives and how poetry gives our lives meaning, and it gives us the ability to process painful things and connect with other people so that we don't feel lost and lonely and inconsolable, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, one of the things I love too about reading this, it reminded me of the last time my mind was kind of blown by something new, which just sadly doesn't happen as often as it used to. But there's this new sort of way of thought called assembly theory. Have you ever heard of that? It's these scientists, I can't remember their names, but it's a mathematical model they built where everything is like considered according to the number of steps it took to create it. So now if you think of like a book or something as an object, you have to invent paper, you have to invent ink, you have to have the English language, you have to have all the words in the book. So there's all these stuff that had to be assembled in order to assemble this book. And when you think about that, everything is just a mental object. Even like a word has an assembly index, so the number of steps it took to get there, and then the probability of that happened to get there. And it's actually a theory they use to figure out if there's artificial intelligence or alien life anywhere. They can use that. If there's anything that surpasses its assembly index given the time in the universe, it means that life has happened, basically. So but it's really interesting to think though of objects, like all these poems as objects themselves, as like artifacts which are mental objects of a moment or a thought or something like that. So that makes it so a poem about your memory of the dead fish can be near the dream of the snakes, can be near the the tilt-a-whirl, all those things are or news stories or ideas like that are all objects in a way. And so we do have this like cabinet full of stuff that we can look at that you've assembled and collected through life. So it's a really cool way to structure the book, I think.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's it felt, like I said, when it all kind of was said and done, it felt right. That feeling you're never sure when you're done with a poem and you just keep tinkering with it and then all of a sudden you hear it just kind of feels like it clicks, right? Mm-hmm. That's kind of how I felt about the book. It was like, click. Okay, this is done. Yeah. Although I think I would have continued to tinker with it, but
well, it did come out great. So what you mentioned collecting. What are some of the things you collect? Like, what is your biggest collection of something? Do you have anything you can share?
This is the bane of my family's existence. I go on binges. In fact, it's funny because I just got one of my first essays published, a nonfiction essay in LitHub, and it's all about confessions of a serial collector. Because I am a serial collector. I'll go on a binge, I'll collect something for a while, and then I'll get tired of it and I'll collect something else. And I never know what's going to spark my interest. It's usually just I'll see something and it'll speak to me in a weird way. And I'm like, I have to have that thing. I don't know why. And they're strange things. They have no value, really. I mean, it's not like I'm collecting expensive antiques and priceless artwork. I'm collecting things like, cracked doll faces that I find really interesting because there's that the pareidolia, what's that called when
pareidolia,
looks pareidolia, looks human, and also the whole uncanny valley thing. You're looking at something, it looks human, but it's not. So it creates this cognitive dissonance in you. I'm really intrigued by that. So for a while, I was collecting really creepy, old, cracked dolls. In fact, you want to see one? You want to see one?
Yeah, let's see a creepy cracked doll.
Hold on.
Okay.
I'll be right back. Hold that thought.
Okay, so Nancy's going up to get her creepy cracked doll. And once again, I'll just reset and say this. We're talking to Nancy Miller Gomez from her new book, Inconsolable Objects. And let's see.
Okay, so I brought two. And often I just collect the heads. So here's one.
Oh, that is creepy.
Yeah, it's missing part of the back of its head. I just couldn't not acquire this thing. I don't think it would appeal to anyone else in the universe. My family hates it. My granddaughter comes over and is like, I don't like the scary dolls. So I have to put them away when she comes because she doesn't like them. But check this one out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exquisite in its sort of uncanny strangeness, I would say.
Yeah. So, I went on a creepy doll binge and I was actually taking photographs of them and I was writing to them. I was, creating persona poems
to really interesting.
Creepy dolls, giving them backstories. But then, it's, because I'm a serial collector and prone to obsessions. That obsession gone, and now I'm collecting something else.
Have you ever been to the Museum of Jurassic Technology down in LA?
I haven't.
Oh, you got to go because it's a museum. It's a strange little museum on it's like Pico Boulevard or something. And it's,
you know what? I know of it. And I don't know why I've never been there. I think whenever I tried to go, it wasn't open because it's open strange hours.
It is strange hours. They have a tea room on the top with like birds and stuff. It's so cool. But it's like a museum of like obsession, kind of. Certain people just have these little obsessions. Like one person was like nothing but taking photographs of trailer parks. And there's another room that's like x-rays of flowers. And there's like life full-scale models of things. There's people with weird theories about the universe. It's just a fascinating, you would love it.
I'll definitely have to go there next time because that sounds like me. I mean, isn't that what we do as poets? We write to our obsessions.
Yeah, well, that was really my segue. So how is that relating to poetry? So you're writing toward your obsessions with poetry.
I think we do. I think we write towards our obsessions. And, I think this book is filled with my obsessions. It's filled with moments of time, snapshots of time that have lodged in me in some way where I feel like I need to kind of wrangle the memory onto the page so that I can come to terms with it. And, I often think about how do other people who aren't poets go through their lives, because we're so lucky. We have this thing that we can do when something's kind of troubling us or something's lodged in us and we're carrying it around and it doesn't feel right and it's bothering us. We can put it onto the page and really process through that and then share it with other people who can be like, oh yeah, I know, I get that. I get you. I see you. I hear you, and it connects us in a way that I think is really important, which is partly what draws me to teaching in the jails and the prisons is because of that. It's like, I feel like we're giving people a gift.
Yeah.
We're teaching them not just how to write, but how to connect.
Yeah. And what I was thinking of is, do you think that poets have the ability to resolve their obsessions? Is that something that, if you weren't able to write poems about the cracked doll faces, right? Would you still be collecting cracked doll faces, but you got to a resolution because whatever mental twisty knot that drove you to that obsession was sort of untangled by the poetry? Do you think that's the case?
I don't know if it was the poetry that untangled my obsession with the dolls. I think I just got bored with them. And I think I just, it's I think I have a little bit of that attention issue where it's like I'm really drawn to something for a while and then I lose interest in it and I move on to something else. And yeah, I just sort of lost interest in them. But yeah. And I didn't want to be known as the creepy doll lady. I mean, I wasn't like one of those women who collect dolls with a degree of seriousness. You know those homes where you go into and there's like dolls everywhere? I wasn't that person because I wanted the dolls that nobody else wanted. I wanted the dolls that no collector would actually want to own, you know?
Yeah, the
I wanted
inconsolable
the haunted
ones.
dolls.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's a perfect segue to into our next poem, which is what was it called? The Invisible Mother, about these photographs, which I'd never heard of. And you included some of these photographs so we could see what it is. But set this up, and I'll show some of the pictures on screen too. What is these photos?
So back in the Victorian age, women, mothers, would have portraits taken of their children. And because they had the shutter speed, they had to leave the shutter open for so long in order to be able to process the film correctly. The kids had to hold still. The babies had to hold still. And so the mothers would be in the picture holding the baby still, but then they would obscure the mother in very strange ways, often by just like throwing a blanket over her head, which is so creepy to me. And there was a whole coffee table book actually called The Hidden Mothers that came out, and my daughter-in-law shared it with me. And I was, for a period of time, obsessed with these pictures. In fact, I have one. I have one right here. This is a hidden mother picture. You can see that right there is the mother covered over with a blanket.
Yeah, that is just so strange. I never heard of that either.
It's so strange because it's like the ultimate erasure. You're not here in the room. You're not present. We're going to cover you up. And it just so speaks to the experience of, I think, women and especially mothers throughout history, that your role in life is to hold the baby and not be present and not be documented for history's sake. So yeah, that's a little bit of background. And there's a lot of these photographs out there. I guarantee if you go to any kind of how antique stores often have boxes of photographs and you can kind of go through them, which is another thing that I often collect. If you go through them, you'll find these pictures. You'll see there's a picture of a baby and you're like, how is that baby sitting in that chair? Oh, it's because there's a lump of human holding the baby behind the baby that's been covered over with a blanket. Creepy.
Yeah, that is something. Well, we'll have to look out for those photos for now. I'm sure we'll see it. It'll be like the red car effect or whatever that is. Yeah. Well, let's hear this poem, Invisible Mother. It's a perfect metaphor for a lot of things.
The Invisible Mother. And it begins with an epigraph from Wikipedia, just so that the readers could know what I was referring to. In the Victorian era, young children were photographed with their mother present, but hidden. Wikipedia. The mother's shape, draped in dark cloth, takes on the properties of a chair, a curtain, a cloak. She becomes a living field of fabric, a blank screen, an erasure. Lint gathers in her eyes and the corners of her mouth. She is the rustling in the room, the empty place where dust gathers. Her heart is made of cobwebs, her words glued to the roof of her mouth. No one sees her. Chin quivering like a small bird. She has folded her sorrows into napkins placed at a table set for her children. They feast until nothing is left but her absence. Her fingers tap out time, measuring seconds. She is a forgotten thought, a lamp, a stage, a station of the cross. She bears it silently, this weight, her babies propped across her motionless body. She wears the finery of their bones to mask her naked face. She is counterbalance, stanchion, a breathing pillar of brocade, the space where she begins and ends, debated endlessly in velvet.
And that was The Invisible Mother from Inconsolable Objects by Nancy Miller Gomez. There's a great question here, perfect follow-up, Nancy, from Chelsea McGlynn. She says, I also struggle with obsessive attention to something and then dropping it forever. Do you ever struggle to keep interested in writing/poetry itself? So the great question, too. I was just thinking about that, the last few weeks especially, because I feel like I had sort of two psychological problems in my life that I sort of dealt with in books, and then that's all I'm really driven to write. And so I'm a little, I don't know. And so I don't know if I feel like I need to keep writing right now at this moment, which is something I've been thinking about a lot in the last couple of weeks. Do you feel the same way at all? Do you worry about losing your interest in writing itself?
Well, it's a great question, and it is something I think all writers struggle with it. I don't know, but for me, I've always wanted to write. It's all I've ever really wanted to do, aside from all the other things I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's the most consistent thing that I've wanted to do, aside from, be with my family and hang out with my kids. And I have gone periods of time where I didn't write, but it was usually because I was working, and I was in a phase where I was just having to take care of kids and, get food on the table and working other jobs that were so creatively consuming that there was nothing left over for me to put into my writing. And so I would go years without writing, but at great expense, to my psyche. I would feel incredibly dissatisfied. And coming back to writing felt really very much like coming home. It was like coming back to doing the thing I always felt like I was supposed to do. And so now I feel an immense sense of gratitude that I get to do this thing that I've always wanted to do. When I went off to go get an MFA, and I was older, when I did it, I'd practiced law for years and I'd produced television for years. And then I went off to get my MFA in writing. And I was just so consumed with these oxymoronic feelings of regret and gratitude at the same time, because regret that I hadn't done it years and years and years before, and gratitude that I was getting to do it at this moment in my life. And I think that's how I feel most days. I'm really grateful that I'm getting to do this thing that I love to do so much. I will say there are periods of time that I go through where I guess I'm just kind of fallow. I'm not writing. And I had a conversation once with Dorianne Lux about this when she was my faculty advisor at Pacific, where I got my MFA. And I was like, so what happens when you feel like you don't have any poems left in you, when you're just not writing? And she's like, well, do something else,
Mm-hmm.
Go paint the wall, or, knit a sweater, find something else to do, and, it'll come back, and it does. And I find that's true. So I try not to put too much pressure on myself when I'm not writing, because I think when you're not writing, you're collecting material. You're just gathering up. You're always working on something. Your brain is, the first job of a poet is to pay attention, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so even if you're not writing, you're still collecting material for future poems. And if you're reading poems, then you're also studying your craft, maybe not directly, but in an indirect way. Because, to quote another person, and I can't remember who said it, if your writing's not going well, often it's because your reading isn't going well,
Mm-hmm.
So during those times when I'm not writing, I just keep reading and I keep paying attention, and I do other things as Dorianne recommended, and eventually a poem will come to me. It does. It will come back. And so I think while I tend to be obsessed with other things, writing is sort of the overarching impulse that I carry throughout my life. The desire to, capture what I'm experiencing on the page. And so I can, first of all, come to terms with and understand it for myself. And then secondly, share it with other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, sorry for stifling a laugh there as you were talking about. I read the comments for to find questions. And Ted Guevara says, "I collect cereal boxes, and they take a lot of room, so I'm a cereal collector." So I'm trying to learn that. Thanks, Ted, for messing with me as we go. But so I wanted to talk about that too. I watched the last episode to make sure we don't talk about the same stuff. And one of the things we
talked about everything the last time.
We talked about a lot, as we tend to do. But we talked about how you moved from, because you wanted to be a writer, and you wanted to change the world through writing and creativity and storytelling. You went into TV thinking that was the medium where you could be the most effective. And so we talk all about that last episode. Go watch it, Rattlecast 146. But you didn't talk about the original impulse. So what was it? When did you know that you wanted to write? And that was a vehicle of changing anything.
As far back as I can remember, I wanted to tell stories. In fact, hold on here. Sorry, I'm going to moon the camera. This is my very first poetry book that I ever wrote.
Oh, wow.
And I did it when I think I was 9. And you can see it's got love, peace. It's got all these things. And then it's got poems, and they're terrible. And they're so cute. Little 9-year-old me writing about freedom. And oh my God, this is embarrassing. I can't even tell you this one.
Well, can you read one? That'd be great. I think you should have to read it. You can't show it without reading one. So
howdy. No. I can't read these. But oh, this one's so cute. A friend is, in the first line, a friend is a weeping willow. Very typical stuff for a 9-year-old to be writing. But I think even back then when I was a kid, I wanted to write. And in our culture and in my family of origin, although my parents were incredibly supportive of me and they inundated me with books and art and culture, I wasn't encouraged to pursue writing as a serious career because, that's not how you support yourself. You go to law school, you do those things, you do the legitimate things. And I think I didn't have enough confidence in myself to do that. And also, I was a single mom at a young age and had children to support. So writing didn't feel like the thing I could pursue and still be able to take care of my family. So I postponed it and constantly postponed it. And, once you start postponing things in your life, it becomes ingrained, and it's really hard to break out of that postponement cycle and always thinking, oh, I'll do that when this happens. I'll do that when that happens. And then you never get there and you never do the thing that you want to do. Mm-hmm. So, here's to going back to school and writing poetry after, 2 careers and raising children, right?
Yeah. So you did that. You went to law school, and we talked about this last time, but you went to law school, then you started, producing reality TV shows back when the idea was that they would be a positive influence on the world by showing goodness. And so those shows like A Wedding Story, but we talked about all that. But then you moved back when you realized that wasn't making a change for good because it was all being co-opted by, the interests of, marketing and things like that. You went back to poetry and writing, other means, but fiction and poetry and nonfiction. Why do you think that can do more good for the world than television could?
Well, I think television could do a lot of good for the world. I just think that it doesn't because it's not. I had a meeting years ago, and they were I might be trouncing on old territory here. I don't know if we covered this in our last conversation, but when I first, when I was just a baby producer starting out in television, I got a meeting with one of the executives at Nickelodeon, and I was so excited because my ultimate goal was to produce children's television, because if you're ever going to change the world, isn't that where you want to start, right? And I went in and I pitched all these altruistic shows that were just going to be great for kids. And I'll never forget, the network executive was so sweet. She was really a nice woman, but she was like, Nancy, that is not the reality of the business that we are in. It is whoever can draw the most eyeballs to the screen and We are not a business based on altruism. And if you want to do good in the world, maybe you should rethink what you're doing, and maybe you should go work for a nonprofit, because I don't think you're going to get to produce the kinds of shows that you want to produce in this industry, in this particular climate. And I didn't give up. I kept trying for years. And well.
Do you think it was, worth trying? I mean, I hate to say it that way, but I'm thinking about the new technology, especially TikTok, which is just such mind rot. And, YouTube Facebook has Reels, YouTube has Shorts, trying to copy the same thing, which is just, they don't, there's nothing but the algorithm, how long you'll look at something. Like, it really, and so it ends up being this stream of just rot where it so tunes into your idiosyncratic obsessions, to speak of that again, and just feeds you the same thing over and over and over again, that you can't, like an addiction to this dopamine hit that you keep. It's just terrible. And I think that should be banned. But is there any way to, use that for good, do you think?
Oh, I think there's all kinds of ways to use it for good. The problem is, will people watch it?
Well, that's the thing, though.
The bottom line is,
I can put
George Saunders has this great quote, and I don't think it's in one of his books. I actually think it was in an interview where he said, if there's something really bad happening in a culture, oftentimes the people in that particular time period, in that culture, don't recognize it as bad. They don't, it doesn't get recognized as bad until years into the future, when people look back on it and go, ooh, that was really bad. And I kind of feel that way about, a lot of the nonfiction programming that is getting produced. That's not to say that there isn't some that is good. I mean, my daughter will sing the praises of the Great British Baking Show, because she loves that. And it is very sweet, kind-spirited. But the majority of those shows are not kind. And, they're not modeling the behavior that I would want my daughters to emulate. And they are scripted. That's the thing that really gets me, is that fiction is more real than nonfiction, than reality, because at least fiction purports to be what it really is. It's fictitious, right? It's owning that. Whereas reality is purporting to be real when it's not. It's entirely fictitious. And so we've created this weird loop where people can't tell the difference between what's true and what's not true. And then look at our political climate. What's happening? There's all these people that are completely comfortable buying into alternative facts, and completely comfortable buying into whatever truth is being told to them, even though in their heart of hearts somewhere, I believe they know it isn't true. And I'm sorry to get political on you, but you brought it up.
Well, it's the same thing too. I mean, it happens with TV, with the reality TV, but then social media is the same thing, with everybody putting forth their best self unwittingly, being those fake producers that put out fake content that's curated and choreographed, and then everybody, it's just such a negative effect of all that too. And I mean, to me, I think that's why we need poetry, because it's the most real thing we could possibly produce, I think. But
and I agree. And in fact, I think I told you I was working on a collection of personal essays, and that in fact is sort of the thematic spine of the book. It's called Self-Deception for Survival, a handbook. And it's about my journey through, the being a young single mother working in a man's business world, bashing my head up against the glass ceiling, trying to get ahead, and feeling like I didn't change the world changed me, and not for the better. And I had to keep, I got co-opted, and I had to keep buying into the fantasy, unreality of what I was doing, that it was ultimately good. I'm keeping people working, and I'm doing all this. And at a certain point, I had to face the truth that, no, I'm not doing good in the world. And if I really want to do good in the world, then I have to walk the walk and talk the talk. And that's when I came back into writing and poetry, and, thanks to Ellen, began teaching poetry in jails and prisons, because I do feel like, we make choices about how we live in this world, and what we contribute, and how we shape the world around us. And what I was doing wasn't making the world a better place. And I think, coming to poetry, it may not be factually accurate, but it does have to be true. And so that was me facing my truths and coming to confront all of these stories I'd been telling myself just to sort of get through my life all these years. And anyway, that's my next book. You'll have to
Well, I can't
have me
wait
back
to
on.
read that. I'm doing a bad job of pacing this show. We only threw 3 poems. We need to keep going. Let's do How to Forget.
Oh, sorry.
Next. It's my fault. I try to keep an eye on the clock, and I'm behind.
Well, you're like one of the few people that can actually get me to just chatter. I'm
Well,
sorry.
that's great. People are really
I'm
loving it,
rambling.
but they love your poems too. I want to get through 8 poems. So let's do How to Forget.
Okay. Excuse me 1 minute. I have the sweetest rescue puppy in the world who is 15 years old now. And he has doggy dementia, sundowners, and the sun is going down. So you can hear him whining in the background. I'm just going to ask that he get, because otherwise he's going to bark through this next poem. So hold on one
Okay,
second.
no problem.
I'll be right back.
Okay. So, yeah, that's Nancy Miller Gomez getting her rescue dog. One of the things where Nancy lives, it's a tarantula highway. She was telling me one time where once a year, these migrating mating tarantulas move through her yard. So hopefully that's not this time of year.
Okay, sorry.
Hey,
Now,
Nancy.
my sweet elderly pup with dementia has been, he's in my son's room now, so he'll be very happy.
So, so I have this poem. Go ahead whenever you're ready. How to Forget is next.
Okay, hold on. I have to find the poem. Okay, here it is. How to Forget. I am lining my memories up against the wall. They are begging me for reprieve. Here is the night I found you on the floor, folded like laundry. Here are the bloody towels, the smell of ammonia and rotting fruit. Once I was a wife. Now I am a wilderness. I am the grove of aspens. All that's left of you are candle stubs and carpet stains. All your goodbyes have turned into horses. They are grazing peacefully. Your words are blades of grass. Our last argument, a pasture dotted with poppies. That night, I watched you wash your bruised hands in the sink. Now, I see 2 fish diving into a stream. I am remembering the last time we spoke. I have turned it into a holiday, marked it on the calendar with an asterisk. A day to eat cake, a day to enter the cellar and retrieve the special vintage with its sweet notes of smoke and honey, lush on the tongue, easy to swallow. The golden-crowned sparrows have returned from their long summer, singing of loss. 3 notes, 1 for the knife, 1 for the cut, 1 for all I have forgotten.
Okay, and that was How to Forget from Inconsolable Objects. There's a question. Let me scroll back to if I can find it. Well, I'll paraphrase. It was Dick Westheimer who wanted to know how an MFA that you got changed your writing or affected you as a poet. Was it something that's a thing a lot of people wonder about? Like, should they go? Is it worth it? And so did that change your writing in any way?
Well, I think for me, it just put me in community with people who were poets. And that was really life-changing. And some of the people that I met in that program are still my closest friends to this day. And we are in writing groups together, and we critique each other's work, and we help each other, and we support each other. And that in and of itself was invaluable. Can you create that outside of an MFA program? Absolutely, you can. So do I think it's necessary to go to an MFA program? No, but I also did feel like I got access to some amazing faculty. I think you're a big fan of Pacific, am I right?
I've said it's the best one, I think. I think of
Yeah.
the Rattle
It's a
Poetry
great
Prize.
program.
Yeah, we've had like
It's an
20
absolute-
winners, and like 6 are from that program. So it's great. Craig Van Rooyen and a whole bunch of people.
Well, Craig is one of my dear friends. He's in one of my writing groups, and because he was like the semester ahead of me. But yeah, it's a they have great faculty, and for me it gave me permission to sort of indulge myself and to say to the rest of the world, Don't bother me. I'm in school and I'm writing now, so leave me alone. And when you have, children and grandchildren and responsibilities and things that you're doing in your life, it's really nice to be able to have that reason to say, okay, because often people think, oh, you're writing poetry. Are you writing verse for Hallmark cards? Are you, they don't see it as a legitimate pursuit.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can't exactly say to somebody, no, I can't help you right now because I'm writing a poem, because they are like, well, just write it later, But when you're in school, that gives you a purpose. It gives you a reason to say to people, no, I actually have an assignment due and I have to do this and I'm going to take the time to do it. And I'm going to go to this program that it's a low residency program, but I'm going to be in residency for 10 days. So don't call me and ask me about the tile for the bathroom because I'm busy.
Mm-hmm.
Figure it out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have a lot of complaints about them. I compare them to multi-level marketing programs, I mean, it is like the people at the bottom are paying the people at the top and there's no other avenue for anything you're going to get out of it. But also at the same time, I say it's a great experience. And if you can afford it or get a free ride and have the time, it's really fun. And so, I mean, it's a complicated question. And Monica Dobo says, interestingly, though, many of the poets published in Rattle do have MFAs, and that is kind of the founder effect. It's like if you've taken the time to go through a program and set that time aside for your life and taken poetry that seriously, you're a better poet just because you did it, because you cared enough to do it, which means, and there are a lot of people with MFAs, so it's just by nature of, survival of the fittest.
Well, it's also I think it is also putting skin in the game.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you can do that in many other ways. I don't think you have to get an MFA to do that. You could make a commitment to seriously, undertake the study of poetry in many other ways. You could read a book of poems a day, by contemporary poets that you admire and the ones that you don't admire, because sometimes reading the ones you don't like it's even more valuable because you learn things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I think you could put yourself on a course of action and a track where you're not in an MFA program, but you are seriously undertaking the study of poetry. But one of the things that I think is incredibly valuable is putting down your defenses and listening to feedback and, thinking, I don't have all the answers. I have much to learn and I have so many ways I can improve. And, what can I do to get better? Because I just aspire to write better and better. I don't think I'm nearly as good as I would like to be. And I'm on that trajectory. And the MFA was just one step in helping me get there. Now I'm out of the program. And I felt some remorse when I got out of the program because I thought, well, now I'm actually really ready to be in the program and I'm out of the program. Now I actually feel like I know the questions I should have been asking that I didn't know before. But now I have to do it on my own. I have to study.
Or you could be like Michael Mark, who went he has like 4 of them, I think.
I love Michael Mark. I actually met him at Pacific. So
I know you did.
Yeah.
There's only one. I think he went to Warren Wilson. He went to like 4.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I wanted to do another poem. Whatever he's doing, it's working.
It does work. I wanted to do another poem next, but there's a question about the last one, and people wanted to hear this too. So Jimmy Pappas wanted to know, do you find people wanting to know the details of that poem, which was How to Forget, and do you tell them the details?
Well, okay, so that's a really interesting poem that used to have an epigraph that I stripped out of the poem. The poem, I've been writing a series of poems that are based on news articles or snippets from something that I read that inspires the poem. And often I will use a quote from the news article in the poem to sort of launch it. In this case, I decided to take it out. But it was based on an article I read in the New York Times about how you can manipulate your own memories. And you can actually control what you choose to remember and forget. And the things that you choose to remember, you can re-remember them in ways that serve you moving forward in your life, that are more palatable to you. And I just found that whole concept so interesting. It also really ties into the personal essays that I'm writing. Self-deception for survival? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
A handbook? Of course. But so that poem was really an exercise on my part about launching it from that place of, okay, I'm going to line all my memories up as if they are in a firing squad, and they have to plead for their existence. And some of them are, not going to make it, and some of them are. And the ones that do make it, I'm going to change them up. And so it really was just a writing exercise.
Mm-hmm.
Many of those things that are in there are not factual. They didn't happen to me. I did not pull any person off the floor bloody. I know that people may be dismayed to think that I made that up, but in writing the poem, it sort of wrote itself. And it was like my mind was presenting me with details that I could alter, and I could reimagine, what if this was your memory? What could you do to it to make it something you could live with? How could you change it? And that's what that poem is really about. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, great.
Did I answer the question?
No, you definitely did. Yeah. Let's read another poem. The next one's The Game, which I'm glad you picked. It's one of my favorite poems in the book, and a good example of how the book is so eclectic too, because there's so many different styles and topics going on. This is totally different. I think if with a different structure, you couldn't have got this poem in. So I'm glad you did.
Well, I really hope that my grandson Atlas is watching, because this poem was written for him. Where is it? Hold on. I'm trying to find it in my manuscript.
43.
Yeah, thanks. Be there in a second. Bear with me. Sorry. I should have had these all lined up. The game. The game. I love you, I say to the boy. He's 3. I love you more, he says back. But I love you most, I say, and wonder how love became a competition. I love you more than Halloween candy, I say. I love you more than sky, he shouts. I love you so much, I must dance around the house all night doing this, and I demonstrate the move, which looks something like pitching a baseball with both hands while shaking my ass. He looks impressed, comes back with, I love you, 50 bonks on the head, and slaps the back of his own noggin again and again to show me what this kind of love looks like. I love you the whole driveway and parking lot. I love you every pothole in New York City. I love you more than A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I love you more than purple, more than gold. I love you more than cat vomit and dog poop. I love you all the dead people in the cemetery. I love you eyeballs and bones and rotting skin. And he's looking around wildly for the right thing to say, his eyes scanning the floor, the ceiling, the shelves, and then, I love you so much, I hate you. We stare at each other across the kitchen. I know what he means. I love you so much, I hate you too.
Yeah, it's a great poem. That's The Game by Nancy Miller Gomez. And a great example, I think, of that thing you're talking about between truth versus facts. I'm sure he didn't say all those things, but I'm sure it was inspired by something authentic, and it becomes a bigger truth than the reality itself was of all the details. So it's just a wonderful poem. I love that. And everybody watching loves that too. Let's double up on poems and read another one. Lost is next on 49. And I say, while you look that up, that if you have any questions for Nancy, I already have, but if you have any more, leave them in the chat windows. Helps if you put like a big question in all caps or something, so I can see it. But if you have any questions, leave them in the chat windows on Facebook or on YouTube, maybe Facebook. I glance over there too. And if you like this, if you enjoy what you're watching, do click the like button. It's funny, at this time of the show, we always have twice as many viewers as likes. And so you could click that like button if you forgot to, and click it right now, and it helps poetry spread around.
Yeah, click the like button. What, you don't like me?
Exactly. You like Nancy. So, okay, well, let's hear the next poem, Nancy.
Okay. So this is one of those poems that, again, was based on a news article. Because, I get tired of writing about myself, and sometimes I just want to write about something else. So I'm working on a series of poems inspired by news articles, and this is one of those. And it begins with an epigraph. It's called Lost. A boy who was lost in the woods says a bear kept him company. No one can prove it didn't happen. The bear felt the boy before she heard him, sensed a disturbance deep in the knotwood, and knew something was scared there. At first, it unnerved her, but its cub-like crying drew her closer, till a shift of wind brought the unnatural smell she'd learned to fear. She hesitated, sniffed again. This was different. Not so manlike or musky. It was nuanced with sugar and sour milk. She was cubless that winter and drawn toward the hurt animal, not with a hunger, but an ache. The orphan had curled up like a pup, nose to knees, whimpering. She patted in, snuffing softly, singing a lullaby of grunts and chuffs. The child turned toward her musty breath, reached his numb fingers out for her coarse coat. She curled in her claws and lay down slowly, settled herself so she wouldn't crush him, made her body into a cradle and tucked him into her. He dozed. She stayed that night and the next as the temperature dropped below freezing. He told her his stories: purple crayons, night kitchens, magic pebbles. She clicked her tongue and hummed about meltwater and spring. When she heard the far-off calls growing closer, she licked the fringe of blonde fur on his forehead, nudged him awake, and left. Back in the fold of his family, they noticed his unwavering gaze, the way he hesitated in doorways, grazing the air with his face, scenting the room, as if always searching for something he'd lost.
And that poem was Lost by Nancy Miller Gomez from her new book, her first full-length, Inconsolable Objects. And so we talked a lot about the poetry in the prisons that you do. You founded a nonprofit that does that, and I've done it several different places. And I know that you've still done it, because I heard you were there at one point. Are you still doing that? Has anything changed about what you do with teaching in the prisons?
Well, I'm not actually actively teaching in the jails, but I'm going to give a shout out to Deb and Renee and all the volunteers in the Poetry in the Jails program who keep it going, because we've got like 6 weekly classes going in all of the Santa Cruz County jails, all staffed by volunteers, all teaching the craft of poetry and the gift of poetry and expressing yourself to, men and women in the carceral system who are coming back into our community. And we've also just, we've launched a class at the library, the downtown library, where people can come to continue their writing practice post-incarceration, where they write alongside members of the community. And it's wonderful. Because that was one of the things we kept getting asked for. We're teaching these workshops in the jails, and the men and the women were like, well, how do we keep doing this when we get out? Where do we go? What do we do? And so now we've launched this library program where they can have a workshop they can continue to come to once they're released. And what's beautiful about it is, people from the community come and join them. And it's a way of embracing back people who've been involved in the justice system into our community and lifting them up with poetry. And so a huge shout out to the folks in the poetry, all the volunteers in the Poetry in the Jails, poetryinthejails.org organization that is currently thriving in Santa Cruz. And then for a bit, I was teaching up at the Juvenile Hall. And then recently I did the prison tour of New York State, which was great. Cornell University.
That's what I heard, yeah.
Yeah, it was really so meaningful. Cornell University has this wonderful prison education program, and they flew me out to be the visiting writer basically I went around to different prisons and conducted workshops. And, I love teaching in jails and prisons because, people are so receptive and appreciative and so hungry for intellectual discourse and creativity. And it just feels really important. And I feel like I'm doing something that matters in this world and that makes a difference. And that's a good feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's really clear to see that it's the place you can do something with poetry that does the most good, given how much it affects. People need something positive given, the lives and what happens.
Right.
And,
Right.
and so giving that actually has a big effect, a big domino effect spreading out forever.
And the truth is, we weren't all born into ideal situations. And some people really didn't win the parent lottery or the life lottery, and they don't have the resources that the rest of us have to be able to cope with life's difficulties and hardships. And that is something that, as poets, that is something that we can give back to the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we've got 2 more poems, and let's get them both, and we'll ask a question in the middle too. So let's do Ode to the Nonconformist next. An ode.
Okay. Do you know the page number?
79.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this is another poem that also came out of a news article, and it begins with an epigraph. Ode to the Nonconformist. Evidence is mounting that a tiny subatomic particle seems to be disobeying the known laws of physics. The New York Times. Tiny lepton, tatted head to toe, sporting a leather jacket and a Harley, waving its middle finger at physics as it faces down the 4 fundamental forces of nature with a cocksure fuck you to all the milquetoast particles who get starstruck and giddy when this punk morsel stage dives into the mosh pit of relativity and breaks all the cosmic laws, slam dancing to its own subatomic transmix. Even when accelerated, smashed, and fat-shamed, this overweight electron continues to mock an international team of 200 scientists with its too cool for school behavior. When the laws of physics mandate that it spin, it does the opposite. Some say this rebel might hold the key to mysteries that have long preoccupied our lonely species. Some say it carries the secrets of dark matter in the confines of its supercharged soul, and they intend to torture a confession out of this infinitesimal insurgent. So they place its bad ass onto a giant track and make it run through a superconducting circus act at minus 450 degrees to study its peculiar wobble. Oh, puny humans, they are no match. I cheer for the muon. Keep silent, little one. Hold on to your secrets, even if the entire universe hangs in the balance.
Yeah, another great poem. Another one inspired by a news story. That was a Ode to the Nonconformist. A fun jumping off point for that one from Inconsolable Objects. Monica Dobos wanted to know, why poetry and not prose or fiction? I know you're writing, nonfiction too with the essay book, but she also says, what's the holy grail of poetry? That might be a nice question to round it out. I mean, why poetry ultimately?
Well, it's a great question. And I actually started out wanting to write prose and realized I just didn't have the chops to do it. And all of my favorite writers had kind of started out as poets. I think the poets are the fighter pilots of the writing world. I really do. I think they fly, figure eights around the rest of us. And so I went to study poetry seriously because I wanted it to make me a better writer. It's like working out at the gym if you're a marathon runner, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then I fell in love with poetry because who wouldn't? Who doesn't when they embrace it and study it seriously? I do intend to continue writing prose, and I am grateful for the opportunity to have been able to study and immerse myself in poetry, because I definitely do think it made me a better writer. I mean, I've been able to bring all of the things that poetry does into my prose, hopefully, and I'm much more satisfied with my sentences and my rhythms and my word choices and all those things that we really work on and focus on in poems. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, well, we know your prose is great because there's prose sections in Punishment. So, and everybody should check out too that article in LitHub that just came out about collecting But yeah, the same answer for me too. I mean, I went to, I took a poetry class because I thought I might want to write science fiction. I thought it might be fun, and it would happen to be with James Longabaugh because that was the freshman poetry class.
Oh, you couldn't get any better than that,
know,
right?
And so the rest is history. I just fell in love with it, and I didn't expect to. But once you do it, you can't really help it. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Well, let's round it out with one last poem, Nancy. The last one you want to read was Still on page 83.
Yeah, and this is one that you published. I love this poem.
Yeah, it's interesting. Last time I saw this sort of embarrassing moment when I thought you'd won the Neil Postman Award for metaphor. And this was the poem that I thought you'd won it with. And I don't know, it must have been like the
really
runner-up.
Funny. You're like, yeah, you won the Neil Postman Award. I did. And I'm like, well, that comes with a fairly large monetary.
Yeah. Well, you were very close, Elise. I think you were probably the one we were, So, and it was this poem Still. So everybody should listen to the metaphor at the end of this, which is just wonderful.
Still. The last apple hangs on into winter. Shriveled and brown as a shrunken head, it holds onto the branch even while falling further into itself. Drops of rain sweat slide down its mottled skin, catch light from the sun, and turn gold. Isn't persistence beautiful? The woman who shows up daily for her dose of methadone. The man punching the clock, shift after shift, though he carries his heart through each day in a cold, empty chest. The small boy who tries to make sense of the lines his teacher has made on the chalkboard. How do we keep on? The bird drops its song over and over, picking it up and dropping it, little notes spilling down the mountain. My father, on his deathbed, eyes still filled with wonder. He lingers longer and longer in the space between each breath, stepping carefully onto the ledge of his last thought.
Yeah, that image is stepping carefully onto the ledge of his last thought. What a great poem. Great poem to end on too, Nancy. Thanks for being a guest once again. It's such a pleasure talking to you all the time. So fun. And a great book too. It's great to see you come out with that. I'm glad you did.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, once again, that was Nancy Miller Gomez. You can find Inconsolable Objects from YesYes Books and on Nancy's website, nancymillergomez.com, spelled just like it sounds, nancymillergomez.com. Now, we are going to take a little break and go to our prompt lines. And the prompt for this week was to write a poem using a regular meter of some kind that references your ancestral home. So, regular meter, that means just anything that's like, the beats or the syllabics or whatever are consistent. That's all regular means. Some people asked if free verse counts, and no, free verse doesn't. It's like the opposite of free verse, regular meter. And then reference your ancestral home, because we had that book by Julie Kane last week we were talking about. So that's the prompt for this week. To share a poem, it's a one-page max as well, I should remind you. Email it to promptlines. That's promptlines, all one word, at rattle.com, promptlines@rattle.com. Then find the Zoom link, which I'm about to deploy. Join the Zoom to share your poem. We'll show it on screen as well. And but if you just want to watch and enjoy everybody's poems, sit right where you are, because it still streams on YouTube and on Facebook and on X. And the viewing experience is best there because you can see the poems as folks are reading them. So if you just want to enjoy the poem, sit tight. But either way, I'll be right back with more poetry. we're back. Thanks for your patience. Our Prompt Poems editor, Katie Dozier, is not here today. This is the first episode, sadly, that she has missed in about 2 years, maybe. And Lizzie, her daughter, has a ballet recital right now, the big end of the year thing. It's at this huge amphitheater, and she was going to try to get back in time, but has not and probably won't. So let's share that poem. But the prompt, once again, was to write a poem using a regular meter of some kind that references your ancestral home. And here's Katie's poem. And she doesn't usually write in form and meter, so this is a stretch for her as well. Here we go. This is Katie's poem, Run for the Roses. Okay. Let me get this up too. All right, Run for the Roses. Kentucky gallops through my mind. Some gates reopen, pulled aside. The just mowed grass, another slip and slide. Here the houses sit in rows, chocolates tucked in crinkled paper where she once lived, behind the green shutters of the wood-planked home. Lightning bugs float as we search for my name on her mossy tombstone. Our feet circle heads, so they grow new halos. All at once aware of the bluegrass kissing my soles. All at once aware of the weight of roses in my old Kentucky home. Yes, that was Katie Dozier's poem, Run for the Roses. And Katie, sorry she couldn't be here. She really wishes she could, but we're still sharing her poem anyway. And maybe she'll get back at the very end of the show, but it's looking unlikely. So my poem for this week was this. And it was, I haven't done a sonnet in a while. So this is my sonnet. It's called Winona Boulevard. And Winona, that's my grandmother's home, where she grew up, and so you'll hear about that. And Winona, interestingly, means it's the Dakota word for firstborn daughter, which I always thought was interesting. My grandma living there, her first generation, moving to Western New York. This is Winona Boulevard. As kids, we climbed the old stone fireplace in the back half of Grandma Green's backyard, the half she left for squirrels and birds, a space outside of time with oak trees standing guard. We sat atop that handmade stove like kings upon the sturdy throne of all we knew we didn't know. But that's the way with things. Her father built the house. He turned each screw. He piled the rocks from shovels full of earth and churned the mortar, too. 3 winters there, he found his warmth beside that crumbling hearth we clambered on. A little shack. That's where he lived for us. It's gone. Like him, she's dead. Another family calls it home instead. So that is our sonnet for my ancestral home. And yeah, it was actually a Sears catalog order home that he built in like 1908 or something. So, and he lived out in a little shack in the backyard while he was building it for 3 years. And, hopefully it was passed on to my brother for a little while. That didn't work out, and now it's just someone else taking care of it. So that is my ancestral home, which I had to look up. I wasn't really sure what an ancestral home was, but I think it was the one that made the most sense. All right. Now let's go to Carla Schwartz first.
I have to tell you that hearth is pronounced like hearth, not hearth. And now I will
Okay,
go.
well, that's fine. Well, thanks, Carla, for that. But so what do you have for us?
So my poem is going to be a little long. So if you want, I'll just stop after one page. But, you let me know.
Well, let me see. It's like, short. Half the lines are short. It's couplets. It's fine. I think that works.
Okay. Manifest for the alien passengers on SS Gerolstein, 2 July 1938, Antwerp to New York. My homeland, my land is a boat, the sea, its tumult, my freedom. Am I a coward for having fled soldiers, their guns and clubs? First it was the Jewish men the soldiers sought to detain. I cursed my bulging waist as I packed myself as best I could into the hamper and crouched, sweating, peering through the ribs. My only comfort, the scent of Bertha's robe under which I hid. Then my wife shipped me away just after she shipped our good furnishings. If it is the fittest who survive, the fittest must have cunning to thrive. My homeland stolen, my métier, my reason for being, my Breslau forbidden. That country, that evil, that mein Deutschland branded me Jew, not practitioner of medicine, husband, father, lover of Wagner's oeuvre. After 4 days at sea, so much depends on me to find the way to bring my family. Seagulls fly around the masts, not one with a passport. On arrival in New York, I state the truth. My country of origin, none. Though my hope for new country, this us, assigned my race, Hebrew. For me, not a race, but a language I never knew. A label I took on when, whether or not true, for the big hope of freedom to live, work, love. When, after years, it came time for my son to become a man, and the rabbi asked I recite for him in Hebrew, I cursed like hell in High German, hoped no one apart from those who laughed would know that this land, this us, that welcomed us, this country, not quite ours, to where I first arrived from my no home, the SS Gerolstein.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, really interesting poem, Carla. One of the things I love about this prompt was that we get to hear the background stories of everybody's families, which is a lot of fun. I think it was one of the first thing to stand out for that. And then, what is that form with the longer line and then the shorter line? I've never seen that.
Well, I call it parking meter, okay? I'm sorry. It's I actually made this poem go into different meters, and this was the one that it ended up with.
Oh, well,
I'm sorry.
Well, it's a nonce form. A nonce form. Okay,
Yeah,
well, thanks.
thank you.
Thanks, Carla. Always a pleasure.
Right. Yep, you too. Bye.
Yeah, it was Carla Schwartz with Manifest for the Alien Passengers of SS Gerolstein, 2 July 1938. Next, let's go to Dick Westheimer.
Hey, Tim.
Hey, Dick, great to see you.
It's good to see you. And I loved your interview. I loved your poem.
Oh,
And
thanks.
Carla's was really touching. I really appreciated it. I had a hard time with this prompt. It's like Katie keeps stretching me in different directions. And um,
Well, that is the goal. We're trying to get people out of their boxes.
yeah, well, keep getting me out of my boxes. This one sort of writing in, I guess, is it called blank verse when it?
It's blank versus unrhymed iambic pentameter.
Oh, hi. Okay. Well, this is iambic something.
Okay.
Mostly. And what I ended up trying to do is I just looked through my prompt book of little lines that I've written down, and I found one that the first, like that there were 8 words in meter together, and said that's going to start the poem, and I'll see where it goes from there.
Interesting.
And see if I can weave in my old home place.
Okay, well, let's hear it.
Here we go. It's called Replacement Theory. The seasons come when multiflora reach from their home along the path they grow, where phlox and cohosh thrived and sent down roots. The roses probe the air above the road like witches' fingers armed to snag their prey, gesticulate and bare their thorns like sharpened teeth. They rip my shirt, and underneath my skin begins to bleed. Honeysuckle also lines the drive, its new green growth whipping at my face. Euonymus is choking out the trees. Native beech and oak just can't compete. And what about invasive species me, exotic creature brought in from the east, from Vilnius, where my people lived, till burned and beaten by the czarist mobs in turns? I displaced so many other kinds of species I've conveniently unnamed that die irrevocably forgotten by my tribe. What species of an unknown kind and time will grow here and choose to unname me?
Yeah, great movement in that poem, Replacement Theory. Dick, and how do you feel about writing that? You're going to write in meter more often now, or no?
Well, I have written in meter. My poem that came out in Rattle this time around was it's mostly metrical, and so I've done it in the past, not on command, right? I've done it in the past sort of as a first line moves me. So that's how I treated this one, which is I found a first line that was buried in my prompt book, my image book of when I walk around and just write down notes. And it was about the multiflora. And then I decided kept the home place back in mind until it found its way into the poem.
Very cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. Great poem. Thanks, Dick.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep. That's Dick Westheimer with Replacement Theory. Next, let's go to Douglas Silver.
Hey, Tim.
Hey, Doug.
Katie,
good to see you.
all the poets, good to see you as always. Hopefully Katie can watch this another time.
Oh, I'm sure she will. There's no doubt about that. She could.
Oh, good.
She could
Thank
be
you.
torn away from the, the Rattlecast.
I sent in one called Portugal Sonnet. I emailed it in this morning.
Okay, let me pull it up. I found it. Okay.
And while you're doing it, I have a brief little intro which may help understand it better. The summer before the pandemic changed the world, Monica and I spent a month in Portugal. And the day I wrote this piece, I was having difficulty seeing it as my homeland on my father's side for lots of reasons. Originally, I wrote it in free verse, but I revised it into an Elizabethan sonnet for this week's prompt. So here it is. It's called Portugal Sonnet. Strange now imagining this is where I'm from. In front of me, the harbor, the tired fishermen, the stench of shellfish rotting in the summer sun. Church bells hiding somewhere, whispering, Amen. Get out of your boats and come inside from your shadowed rooms, behind locked doors. From the past, from the lies, it's finally time to apologize, to be cleansed in holy water of sins committed by the shore. This is what and where I'm from, yet this a tongue I cannot speak. Of this I say I am never, not, and none. This is not me, there must be some mistake. And then a boy, maybe 16, waiting tables in a cafe I see, could be my son, my grandson. I could be him, he could be me.
Love the rhymes there. Douglas, thanks. It was Portugal Sonnet. Very cool poem. And
thanks, Tim.
Portugal, interesting place to. I've never, been to Portugal. It's a cool place.
It's wonderful. Check it out. That was a tough day because I was just visited the Slave Museum. The Slave Market Museum. They had the pillars and all that. So I was thinking about the history of slavery in Portugal and looking at it compared to here. It was like kind of a tough day. And then I realized, yeah, this is part of my history. This is where I'm from. This is where my relatives centuries ago were from.
Yeah. Well, very cool. Well, thanks so much for sharing that, Doug. Great poem.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, it was Doug Silver with Portugal Sonnet. Next, let's go to Nate Jacob.
Hey, Tim.
Hey, Nate. Great to see you.
Good to see you. I hear rumors that you saw me last week also, so I wasn't there.
Yeah, you showed up as a surprise guest at the end, and I could not believe. I heard you wouldn't be able to make it, and all of a sudden there was the beard.
There it was.
It was impressive how you showed up.
I still laugh about it. Hey, I'd never write in meter for more than a line or two as an effect in a poem, so this was hard.
Well, I know most of y'all don't, so it's good to force you to do it.
It's a good time. And then also, I don't really have a sense in my life for a homeland or a place that I've lived or where my forefathers came from that I feel any sort of feelings towards. So I went to my grandmother, who died before I was born and was a first generation Swedish immigrant.
Yeah.
I didn't even know her name until I was a teenager. My dad never talked about his parents, both of whom passed before I was born. But this is about that, frankly.
Interesting. Well, let's hear it.
Here we go. Sweden is for grannies. I was young then, never thinking that my father once had parents, that his mother had a name. She was a Swede, pure Scandinavian. And I never knew about her, not until one long teen summer. We were camping in the Badlands, and my father let us know how in the homeland there was little in the way of human contact. How a person will avoid you because people just avoid you. Look through peepholes for their neighbors just to wait for them to drive off. to avoid their conversations, to avoid their complications, to avoid the odd discomfort of what might be obligations. And at last I understood she would have rather died than met me. Well, it's not like I believe that, but this meter makes me crazy, and the story'd be quite different if I only would have fit her in a poem where Mormor Thelma could have stretched out, could have spoken like my granny, speaking English without meter, like the Swedish.
I love that rhyme at the end. Dimeter poem. Very interesting. I don't see that very often. Thanks. Thanks for sharing that, Nate.
That's all I got. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks. So Nate Jacob with Sweden is for Grannies. And Audrey Friedman is next. Hey, Audrey.
Hi. How is everyone?
Yeah, great. Well, just me here tonight, unfortunately. But yeah, I'm great.
Okay, tell Katie we miss her.
Yeah, we definitely will.
Okay, this is a Father's Day reminisce in pretty close to iambic pentameter.
Okay.
I see his massive hands shaping the dough, creating loaves of holly, white or rye, a flour haze in Yellen's bakery, Church Avenue's most aromatic store. He'd bring home breads and linzer torts for me, white cardboard boxes tied with baker's string. But none of these confections were as sweet as a moment or two on Grandpa's knee. We'd spend the summer days shuffling decks of cards. Years later, I discovered that he'd cheat to teach me how it feels to say, I win. His patience learned from leavening his bread.
Oh, that's a great story. Yeah, a Father's Day remembrance coming up too, for Father's Day. Yeah, wonderful poem. Thanks for sharing that, Audrey.
Thank you.
Yeah, Audrey Friedman with a Father's Day reminisce, I should have said. Yeah, great as always. Next, let's go to Chelsea McClellan.
Hello, good evening.
Hey, Chelsea, good to see you.
See you too.
So what do we got? What form did you pick?
I didn't pick a specific form per se, but the first stanza came out in Anapest, so I just kind of ran with that.
Ah, okay.
And on the document I sent you, I have a little image of a screenshot where we had a weather alert, just to prove that to myself mostly that this was actually a common belief in our area and not just my family. It says they're very sorry.
Yeah, where are you? Is it
Northwest Ohio?
Yeah, it's funny because I when I was a kid, there's a story. My mom will probably deny this because she's going to watch tomorrow, I think. But we were in Western New York driving down the road. I was in the back seat. I was like, "Mom, it's a tornado," and she was like, "There's no such thing as tornadoes in Western New York." And we just kept driving. I was like, "No, but look," it was really right there. And then on the news when we got home, there was really a story of a little tornado. So that was a very strong memory when I was like 4 or 5. But anyway, so this is the same thing. This common myth that it can't be in Ohio there.
Yep. Yep, due to the rivers. So this poem is Ode to the Rivers of Northwest Ohio. In our town, the tornadoes refused to touch down. People said that the rivers were arms that closed in every storm that had pushed into town with a hug, with the tenderness only a mother could fake well enough to convince a toddler mid-tantrum to sleep at a fireworks show. And I slept like a baby at the fireworks. Didn't know how you measured the distance we sat to make sure that the beauty was all that we saw, not the blast. No rotation to see here. Get back to bed. Dad will come get you if the storms get that bad, but they won't. We live in the town where tornadoes refuse to touch down. It's midnight. My husband and kids are asleep as I writhe on the couch and continue refreshing the radar. My phone says the worst of it's past, but I can't get my fingers to quit. ever since I found out that our town's superpower's a myth. That a father who should have protected his kids let another man enter their room. That the marriages failed for a reason, and friends disappeared for the same. Making sense of old questions, I vowed when my daughter would ask me that I would tell her the truth. But this morning, she asked why she couldn't see Grandma today. Mama's sick. Tired.
Oh, yeah, very powerful poem again, Chelsea. And great poems as always from you, and that anapestic trimeter too. Really interesting form. That'll be good for when Annie Finch is the guest. Hopefully, if everybody thinks this is hard, I don't know, maybe we shouldn't, but I assume we'll probably do a weird, a non-iambic meter for that one. So you've got a head start. Thanks for sharing that.
Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, it's Chelsea McClellan with Ode to the Rivers of Northwest Ohio. Hamet Malak is next.
Hi.
Hey, Hamet, good to see you.
You too, Tim. I'm sorry, I feel like the naughty kid in this because I had to Google meter and all the terms confused me, and so I just wrote something funny instead.
Well, that's all right. Yeah. Well, it's a good good to have introductions and try new things. So what do you got for us? King Tut two-step. This sounds fun.
The King Tut two-step. Yeah. With an epigraph. A poet is someone who can pour light into a spoon, then raise it to nourish your beautiful, parched, holy mouth. Hafiz of Persia, which is not Egypt, but in that general direction. Travelling by foot, I found a pen on the ground. Iambic, he stressed, and stressed he was, swaying side to side, tapping out words that were Greek to me. Some lines about a pterodactyl, he's spelling, and the takeover of accentual intelligence. I brought him to the psych ward. It was just a few meters away, but the waiting room was full of syllables, their eyes darting, knees jiggling, a true syllabic stress fest. He asked that I lay him at their feet so he could count them. This is no time for fetishes and pent-up matters. I realized there was a glitch in the metrics of speech. We needed to restore, back up, reverse, unstress. I took him on a plane to Cairo, the seat of culture, for him to rest. He refused, preferring to pace, and then a click. The sands opened to etched walls beneath. Geometry swam before our eyes, perfect, measured, rhyming. He fainted. We'd come to the birth of the line.
That's great. I love that ending. Really fun poem. Thanks for having fun with it. Yeah, it's great.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was Hamet Malak with the King Tut two-step. And next in line is Zachary Honeycutt, who this prompt was not any trouble for Zach, I'm sure. Hey, Zach.
Hey, Tim. How's it going?
It's good. So this was like, you have to force you to write one not in meter, I think. that'll be the challenge at some point.
I actually, I'm going to throw you guys a curveball tonight because I'm actually doing a poem from a different prompt from earlier this month tonight, if that's, yeah. Actually, I wanted to do the pull a random card from a deck because I actually think I like what I wrote for that. And I had told a bunch of you guys who were really supportive about it on Facebook. It was actually, it was the Mother's Day episode when we were reading those poems, and I refrained from reading it because it was about my mom. And some of you who have been following me on social media know that I've always kind of had a very strained relationship with my mom. So this is from the perspective of a boy who, wasn't close to his mom and kind of a lot of the hardships that I go through every time Mother's Day comes around. Mm-hmm. And so I just wanted to read it because I know Mike Bales and I know some people that I were talking to wanted me to read it. So I'm just going to do it tonight. Yeah.
Okay. Glad you are. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Your House of Cards. Kidnapped before the age of 5, when my friends lived the childhood I survived. I tried my best to keep my calm, but wonder still to this day why you didn't love me. Mom. When I see the endless ads upon the screen announcing the arrival of the Queen, when the red carpet is rolled out every year for that sacred holiday, I think the times other moms asked, "Where's his mom?" If I had said that something had happened to you, it would have been more believable. It would have been easier to articulate than to try to talk about what you did to me and how bad it made me feel. When Dad played his cards right but didn't foresee, you'd be the joker in the deck that would terrorize me. I wish there was a card on the shelf now for an exception like you, to let me know that it was okay to feel like not honoring you. Friends of mine, I suppose, look for that perfect card, the mother of all cards. But I think about the number of cards. There's just so many cards on the shelf. Wonder if they ever end. I was the little boy who you hurt so early on when you taught me that I couldn't trust you to be my friend. And I wonder, Mom, to this day when you sit underneath your house of cards that you've built upon all the years, and you look up at the ceiling and see how flimsy they really are. When you see what you've built by tearing down the concrete life we could have had. When you married that man who tore me down underneath the ceiling of spades and broken hearts, that man that I could never call Dad. When you put so much effort into building that house on the sand, ripping it off the rocks with all the might of a tidal wave and your false strength, rearranging what was already beautiful into a bitter mess and calling it a home. Did you ever foresee the tidal wave that was growing, like I grew inside of you, inside of me? Wish I could say that Mother's Day was done, and I was proud to be the man you call your son. In the house where you won't sleep softly, 'cause Mother's Day is hard. You were a joker. My feelings were a joke to you. But a true magician wouldn't wait up for you to reappear. When I have to shuffle the deck, why wait on you to reappear? When I can, switch the entire deck of cards, then disappear.
Great ending and powerful poem, Zach. Thanks for sharing that. That was Your House of Cards, Zachary Honeycutt. Thanks, Zach. Yeah.
Thank you for the support. See you guys next week.
Yep, take care.
Bye-bye.
And Zachary Honeycutt, Your House of Cards. Let's go next to a first-time participant, and Bethany Jarmal is here. And Bethany's got the twofer going on right now. She's got a poem in the current issue of Rattle, a guzzle, and also her son is in the Young Poets Anthology. So, hey, Bethany, great to see you.
Hi, Tim. Thank you for that. Good evening. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah. So thanks so much. So where are you calling from? We always ask that the first time someone's on.
Yeah. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
I think that might be my favorite city. I love Pittsburgh. It's so beautiful. It's so underrated, as a city.
It is. Yeah.
With all the rivers and and all the lushness. Yeah, I love that. Mm-hmm. So what'd you do for us this week?
Yeah, so I, like many of the poets here, do not normally write in meter or rhyme, but I went with a sonnet, traditional sonnet. So
excellent. We do. It's fun pushing people to things I don't usually do. So let's hear it. A sonnet for you, or rather the hills.
Yes. Okay. A sonnet for you, or rather for the hills. The purple swirling sky, it cracks to shards, then lands upon my notebook's rain-soaked page. Oh, how the needy earth has no regard, while fox on prowl now stops to sniff the sage. My mouth, my breath, there's something new to taste. My love's delights return, and twice as sweet at dawn. The twilight's clouds call out in haste. The periwinkle planet says, don't wait. But take me home to Appalachian skies, to West Virginia's rolling hills, the creek, the mountains basking in the summer highs. I'll hide at home, you can search and seek. But you may lose me to my first true love, sublime skies, naked earth, and mountain tongue.
Oh, I love that. And great for what we were just talking about, too. Yeah, those the lush hills. I love that. Thanks for sharing that, Bethany. I'm so glad you wrote a sonnet, too, and for joining us, too. Hope you do it again soon.
Yes, I'll try. Thank you.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, that was Bethany Jarmel with a sonnet for you, or rather for the hills. Next in line, we've got Laura Berg.
Hello.
Hey, Laura. Great to see you.
You too. I didn't write about myself. I kind of got on this idea of what if you don't have an ancestral home? So here it is.
Okay.
Line segment. What if our hero has no ancestral home? His kin, as if newborn, lack memories, no roots, no passed down way of baking bread, no costumes from a little town, no jig inherited, no intricate quick steps, no faded photographs of bearded men who clutch a pocket watch and glare and curse. What if his loneliness is thick as buttermilk, even rancid as the mud brick vats where leathers died in Fez, the ink inside no deeper than that pond where a woman's tossing a boiled egg in a fit of magic to summon a baby into being and make a line to carry on. Not the kind with arrows on both ends, but one that starts from a dot.
Oh, really interesting poem. Love that ending and love the enjambment throughout that too, Laura. Really cool.
Thank you.
Thanks. So Laura Berg with line segment. Yeah, really neat sonnet there. And next is Jayanti Rangan. Hey, Jayanti.
Hi, Tim. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. So this was a very difficult one, but I did it in it's called trochaic tetrameter.
Ah, yeah, one of those ones that because if you watch the Annie Finch interview or read the Annie Finch interview in Rattle's winter issue, she talks about the importance of all the other meters that we sort of get obsessed with iambic, and she's gonna be the guest in a couple of weeks too, so you'll have a head start on that discussion as well.
Okay. It was a lot of fun once I got the whole rhythm, and also for the topic, instead of choosing my literal ancestral home, what I did was I looked at the ancestral brain and looked at its workings. So this is called Inner Workings of the Ancestral Brain.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Amy dreams of falling from the roof. My sis hurries but is late for school. Monsters under bed shake my child up. Frequent childhood nightmares kill his calm. Brains are sleepless, even during nights. Always plugged in, not a minute off. Making pulse, a sign of ticking minds. Dreams just bring about small goofy shifts. Math and logic go down during this time. Worries form, fear network all around. Active regions shine, other sections gray. Wakeful giant watches horror film.
Oh, that was very cool. Really interesting place to go with that, Jayanti. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jayanti Rangan with Inner Workings of the Ancestral Brain. Yeah, interesting poem. All right, Mary Keating is next.
Hello.
Hey, Mary, good to see you.
Good to see you. I have to say, I'm so excited to get rattled.
Oh, yeah, Mary, too, is in the current issue with a guzzle. So, yeah,
so
welcome
excited.
aboard.
Yeah, I cried reading it.
Aw, well, that's
Anyway.
sweet to see. Yeah, I love how it turned out. I love the guzzle. The section
yeah.
is really great. Like, and so many. I think there's like 4 people that are sort of regulars here in the issue, if I remember right. So it's really cool.
Yeah, that made it super special.
Yeah, it definitely does.
So I did it for Limerick because I didn't really understand the prompt, being from Irish background. But I also had a longer poem. I don't know if I could read the other one too, from the card one. It's just a page. But whatever you want, I can do the Quick
Yeah, they're
one.
actually, it's a shorter night. I think a lot of people were scared off by the meter, and so there are fewer people on the Zoom. So why don't you do both? Do you want to do? I have the gathering up right now. Do you want to do that first?
Oh, okay. Yeah. And
Okay.
I put the picture up. So I pulled the Seven of Swords,
Uh-huh.
which is this guy like trying to pick up all these swords and leaving some behind. So this is what came from that gathering. I gather the knives and barbs, the swords and other pointy things that cut and scare, scar and bleed me. I gather hate and fear, self-doubt and self-talk that zaps and saps life until days lie dead. I gather all the nasty words that spill from the basket of human mouths, multiplying like fishes on the mount. I gather all these things, but they never stop. There's always more than my arms can hold. And in that realization, a seed is planted. The growing knowing I finally gather. I just need to let it all go.
Oh, very cool. Thanks for sharing that. It reminds me, we had a prompt years ago that was write a serious limerick, and that would have qualified for that one too. It's hard to do one that yeah, very cool. Thanks for sharing that. And then the other one is
well, that's not in any form. I just made that up, but this is the limerick form for
oh, okay.
for the it's called Rattle Me.
Okay, Rattle Me. Okay, go ahead.
And of course, Nate already told me that he's one of the characters I said aren't here, but I told him, well, limericks aren't the truth, right? Rattle Me. There's a poetry group to my liking. No one pompous or snitch or a Viking. Full of witches and wizards, a few dragons, no lizards. Where my Sundays are spellbound by writing.
Oh, that's great. I love that, Mary. Thanks for sharing that.
Oh, and thanks for the Rattle. It's so great to be a part of the community.
Oh, well, definitely. We're so glad to have you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was Mary Keating with 2 poems that Rattle Me, the last one. I love that. We should make that as our intro, maybe. Thanks for sharing that, Mary. Okay, and then next, let's go to Mike Bales.
Oh, yeah. I chickened out in the meter poem.
Oh.
I gotta say, I like the ode to the nonconformist.
Uh-huh.
Never heard of that kind of particle. Zach, I gotta say that's a novel use of cards, like House of Cards, kind of gonna fall. I wanted to read this so someone else from the Quad Cities name could kind of pop up in this. Like I said, I was going to collaborate. I emailed it to you too, but it's also, and submittable.
Mm-hmm.
I collaborated on Tuesday, like I said, I was with a local guy named Tony Cardosa, who like 30 years ago was probably bigger time than me, poet. Lately, he's doing some paintings, and he kind of lives in senior housing. So I think he wanted the company Tuesday morning.
Mm-hmm.
We did a few collaborations. This probably worked better than all of them. So, his name is spelled Cardoso, and we traded lines.
Uh-huh.
Birds. All heavenly bodies are a mystery, circling high above, beyond my grasp. Oceans of sky, their depth boundless. Our deepest dreams, shaped cumulus clouds, a child's imagination, an old man's memories.
Oh, that's sweet. I love the back and forth of that, even though it's not written out that way. You can hear it and feel it too. Really cool poem, Mike. And that was for the collaboration prompt last week. So it was find a partner and write a collaborative poem. So
yeah, I still might do it. So, it's experiment in voice.
Mm-hmm. Well, I hope you keep it up. It sounds like he probably really enjoyed doing that with you too, I bet.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Take care, Mike. There's Mike Bales with Birds. A few people left in the lines. Mark Grenier is here. Hello, Mark.
Tim.
Yeah, welcome aboard.
This is mostly iambics that I wrote. It's a sonnet, a Shakespearean sonnet.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So I'm not sure. Well, the title tells it. Okay. Attempting to name my ancestral home. A difficult problem that. To name today my ancestral home. My family are Mongols at best, all fled from under some European sky, They're English, German, Irish, Scottish, the rest unknown, and a genome drawn from who knows where. Not I guess, since I care little for all that stuff. The flight from famine, blows of war, religious tests that read like riddles to disgruntled beasts. The game seems puerile to much like me, who'd rather stay undefined in states, a worldly citizen facing with wiles a mongrel's existence in time, unrefined by bounds my ancestors somehow escaped, by fleeing poor futures, changing, reshaped.
Yeah, great final couplet there. Yeah, attempting to name my ancestral home. Yeah, my home is sort of mostly German, but still, I think I was spared a lot of difficulty because on Wikipedia I looked it up because I wasn't really sure what that meant, and you could just do a house. And so I was thinking like the house that was in our family for the longest made it a much easier prompt. But yeah, very cool. That is a difficulty finding out where your home might be. Thanks for sharing that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it was Mark Grinier with attempting to name my ancestral home. And back from Ireland, I believe, unless he's still there, and it's like 4 a.m., is Brian O'Sullivan. Hey, Brian.
Hey, yes, I am back.
Oh, well, welcome back. I'm sure you had a great trip. It sounded like you were having fun the whole time.
I had a terrific first day, and after that, it was an amazing trip. Yeah, it was terrific. And I have no, if my poem tonight is bad, I have really no excuse for not writing a good poem about my ancestral home because
you were just there.
That's what I've been exploring for the last 2 weeks. So
I wonder if like subconsciously the prompt was partially inspired by you too, because that's exactly what you were doing.
I feel like I need to send Katie a check or something. It's kind of a gift.
Well, at least you haven't yet. That's a good sign.
That's right. I was more conservative on the form than a lot of people. I just did kind of a semi-regular iambic tetrameter, but I had fun with it. Okay, so it's called Poem in Which the Poet's Ancestors Mess with Him. At Murphy's Pub in Bantry Town, all nestled in a dark wood-paneled booth, I ordered a salmon salad. The salty capers tasted like the sea I'd crossed to meet my father's mothers and my mother's fathers and turned them all to lyric poems. They tasted like the tears that were shed at American wakes before the ships. And then I laughed at myself and scoffed. It's just some salt. It's not the secret sauce of saints and poets. Then I saw in the corner of my eye a fireplug of a man with foamy brows and grizzled hair and a leathery face, dressed up in an antique Irish suit, and he might have been scowling at me, and yet he almost looked bemused. I turned around. No one there. The buzz of silence was getting to me, as I'd been traveling alone with my thoughts. And then on the way to the old home place, my mind all focused on staying on the left side of the road and the right side of sanity, venturing deeper out into Old Beara, with the ocean beside me, I saw, as if out of the wild blue, a rainbow, a wispy partial rainbow, but a rainbow still, like the Confleur O'Sullivans were waving at me and tossing me a little toy to play with while I looked for them. And I thought, oh no, that's way too sentimental. I could never put that in a poem.
Oh, that was a great ending, Brian, and cool story. Thanks for sharing that.
Sure, thank you.
Yeah, it was Brian O'Sullivan with Poem in Which the Poet's Ancestors Mess with Him. That's great. Thanks for sharing that, Brian. All right, and last on the Zoom is Dr. Q. Let's see if we can get Dr. Q this time. It's been a struggle before. Let's see. If not, I'll just read the poem myself.
Hello.
Hello, we got you. Yeah, great to join. So where are you calling from, Dr. Q?
So outer space. So tell me, why am I a picture and not a camera?
It must be, there's a video link. There's a little caret. You can pick your camera. Maybe your computer doesn't have a camera, or maybe you didn't pick one. I'm not sure. That's something we can figure out sometime. That's like if you don't have a camera on, or if
I don't see a button for a camera.
Yeah, well, you can start. It's like next to the mute button, there's a video button. But anyway, we've got your voice, though, which is what matters, because I want to hear you read a poem. So what do you have for us today, Dr. Q?
I know, I feel like I should be writing my poems in your voice now. Okay, so here we go. Where have all the soldiers gone? And this is, I traced you back to the 1250s on both sides of the fam bam. A fam of kings, queens, princes, and paternal lineage. So it goes, the lines of one fled the lines of the other. You defied the kings and queens inclined towards a new world, became the history makers, lawmakers, creators of constitutions, a writer plus brothers to sign the Declaration of Independence, and some would become American presidents of the US 5. You fought valiantly for our country, died for our freedoms, but now Lee history has it, 34 years, you had lacked a military presence. So what's with that? I could ramble on, but I shan't align a classic Rattle poem. Never would it work today. Can't have that.
It's a very funny reference there, referencing the last episode of the Poetry Space, where we talked about the classic Rattle poem as a format. A very fun poem. Thanks for sharing that. Interesting insights, too.
So, okay, thank you. Have a good evening.
Yeah, thanks. Glad you got to work. I mean, all we need is sound, really. So it's great to see you and glad it worked.
Okay.
Okay. It was Dr. Q with Where Have All the Soldiers Gone? Let's see. A couple more we can add to the mix. Some poets who are usually here but can't make it. Nividi Karthik says, I've written a poem about my ancestral home. The poem is hopefully, she says, written in tetrameter, but she's working and can't make it right now. So here is Nivi's poem for this week. And here we go. My home. Beneath towering neems it stands, a weathered house of stone and brick. Its walls have seen the countless tales, the lives of those that called it home. Echoes of their laughter still fill the rooms where I once used to play. Each creaking floorboard speaks of time, of footsteps worn and paths retraced. Old photographs and faded frames bring to mind the faces and names. In every corner memories cling like the fragrant jasmine once did. The garden now with flowering weeds whispers my secrets to the wind. Though years may pass and seasons change, the essence of this place remains. Familiar faces drift to me, reminds me that my roots run deep. Yeah, really nice, My Home. That's Nivi Karthik with My Home. Yeah, I love the rhythm in that tetrameter. Good job, Nivi. And let's see, Jared Campbell's here too. I'll do Ted Guevara's next though. And Ted, as always, has an interesting photograph. And this is for those just listening, this is a Jesus statue on a cross, but it is telephone wires. So he's up there with the wires kind of hanging out. And we'll see what that has to do with this poem. Colorization of My Home. This is Ted Bernal Guevara. There in black and white and for centuries, it was believed that disabled people were living under a curse inflicted by God. And that time overlapped, solely naive, upon yours like a live wire. And you had thought worse, the sidewalk cracks were ignited enough with green, and the sky was often rosy at dusk and azure at dawn. It's possible that you've upset someone in Keene, someone less fortunate, someone elusive and withdrawn. It was like that over here. God had the upper hand. He lets you play, laugh, relish in the most iridescent way. But his face cringes overhead, the stars darken and wan. Deity, you thought purply deep about in your youthful day. You weren't sure if cruelty was alabaster in disguise, or onyx, momentous, steadfast, hiding in that paradise. Really cool sonnet there, Colorization of My Home. Thanks for sharing that, Ted. And let's go to late time jumping on is Jared Campbell.
Hello.
Hey, Jared, good to see you. I thought we missed you this week.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
no problem.
Yeah, traveling. Yep.
Well, we're glad we got you. I don't think I see a poem yet, though.
No, you don't. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we can just listen. You can read it. That's totally fine.
Yeah, I'll try that.
Okay.
Yep. So this is about the Campbell family farm.
Ah.
Right. So when my great-grandfather John Campbell died at 56, he left behind two sons, my grandpa Carl and Uncle Charles. My grandpa left for other things, and Uncle Charles stayed with his wife Helen to run the farm. I never saw him farming, though. He'd hurt his back and given up on farm work long before my time. A family friend who owned the laundromat paid him to sweep the floors, restock the soap machine, and empty out the quarters. Charles would rent the fields to other farmers to plant with corn or soybeans till he had no money left, and then he'd sell another field. During my childhood and for many years before, the family farm was a slowly shrinking legacy. Sometimes on Saturdays, my dad would drive Tyler and me the 20 minutes north of Carlinville to see the farm. We'd tromp around the woods alongside Otter Creek shooting hedge apples, as Dad would never bother to buy a hunting license for us. Walking back to the farmhouse, we would pass the hillside covered with the trash that Charles had dumped for 40 years. My memory has blurred it all, except the redness of a Folgers coffee can. Tyler and I only stayed overnight once that I remember. Dad and Mom had gone to St. Louis for something. I remember the house is dark. Helen had bought chocolate vanilla creams at Walmart and put them in a bowl for us to take throughout the afternoon. I don't remember what they tasted like, but I loved them at the time. The fields had all been sold before Charles died. All that was left was the old farmhouse slouching on its compromised foundation. I haven't been back for 20 years except in dreams. I sometimes dream that I'm at a farm where Charles and Helen live, surrounded by fields and fields of soybeans.
Oh, very interesting. Look back at the Campbell family history. Thanks for sharing that. Like, what was that poem called again?
I think I'm gonna call it the Campbell Family Farm.
Ah, well, the Campbell Family Farm by Jared Campbell. Thanks so much for sharing that,
Yep.
Jared. Glad you could make it.
Thank you.
Yeah, take care. Safe travels too.
Yep.
Yeah, Jared Campbell with the Campbell Family Farm. And that is going to wrap up the prompt lines for tonight. Thanks. And it's too bad we didn't have Katie. I just miss Katie so much when she can't be here, which is rare. But she does have... I'm supposed to do the Sciku first. That's right. We decided the Sciku is first. So, the Sciku for this week is based on this article right here. This is from Texas Geosciences, the University of Texas at Austin. And it's right here. Bird song and human voice built from same genetic blueprint. And this diagram that they include kind of says it all. But well, I guess if you if you know what it's talking about. But the family tree, there's the same genes regulate these vocal folds, which appear in both modern birds as varied as hummingbirds and ostriches, and in mammals and in crocodilians. And because of the way that the tree branches, because we're sort of more, closely related to crocodiles than birds, and that way that the dinosaurs branched out into birds, that implies that dinosaurs like the Tyrannosaurus Rex also had these vocal folds and could communicate in complicated ways like birds did, which is really fascinating. So that is this article from the University of Texas at Austin. And the Sciku that was inspired by that article is this: the buzz on the playground, hummingbirds. The buzz on the playground, hummingbirds. That is your Sciku for this week, and that is the show for this week. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Next week's prompt is going to be this: write an ode to something that doesn't conform to typical ode topics and begins with an epigraph. So inspired by the ode we heard from Nancy Miller Gomez, the prompt for this week is going to be write an ode to something that doesn't conform to a typical ode topic. So that's interesting to think about. So an unusual ode, and begin it with an epigraph. So an ode to something surprising with an epigraph. That is your prompt for this week, and that is the show for this week. Now, next week's guest in the Rattlecast is going to be maybe like literally my favorite poet. Now, we haven't published him in a long time, but I love all of his books. Alan Shapiro, his book Song and Dance might be my favorite book of poetry, and I love his other books a lot too. I mean, he's got such use of this musical complex syntax that I just love reading his poems out loud and to myself. And he recently retired from the University of North Carolina, moved up north, and had 2 books out recently. Proceed to check out his one. The other was called By and By. He'll be reading poems from both of those episodes. We'll be talking to Alan Shapiro. That's next week, June 2nd, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. That's the usual time. Rattlecast number 248 with your odes to something unusual with an epigraph. Rattlecast 248 with Alan Shapiro. Hope to see you then. Hope you have a great week in the meantime, and I'll talk to you later. Good night.